Okay. Whew.
Please mute yourselves.
Okay.
Mute your devices. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to our Domestic Violence Awareness Forum. We will be starting in about 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Good morning and welcome to our Domestic Violence Awareness Forum. It is my pleasure to introduce our chair of our executive board for our Alpha Eta Zeta Dove Foundation, Ms. Doris E. Owens Smith. Ms. Smith?
Good morning. Today we're living in unprecedented times. Our holding this program virtually today is the testament of these times. What is not unprecedented is domestic violence. Domestic violence is nothing new under the sun. However, awareness of it has become more paramount. There are billboards sharing information on every street corner about how to seek help for those who are in such situations. What was once a secret in many households is becoming uncovered, be it through visual, physical signs, emotional signs, or acts of violence, which tend to serve as cries for help at times. Domestic violence is also displayed in some circumstances through murder, suicide, or homicides. You would be surprised who has or is experiencing domestic violence. Domestic violence has no color, it has no marital status, no socioeconomical status, or educational level. Domestic violence is not prejudice. This morning, we welcome you to our 10th Domestic Violence Awareness Platform, where you can gain information not only for yourself, but for someone you may know and love. Knowledge is power. Let's become empowered and be the one to help save ourselves and someone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. We will go in the order as the slide projects. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Stacy Smith, the chair of this Domestic Violence Awareness Program, and I am honored to present this virtual program to you. At this time, as I said, we will follow the order that the slide shows with our greetings from our Tennessee Domestic Violence Coordinator, Ms. Candace Anderson, followed by the purpose from our Get Engaged coordinator, Ms. Deanna Williams, and then the slides will project the next participants. Thank you so much. And now we'll have Ms. Anderson bringing greetings.
Thank you. Well, good morning and greetings. I am Sora Candace Anderson, and I serve as the State of Tennessee Domestic Violence Coordinator for Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. It is my pleasure to be here, and I give thanks to the ladies of Alpha Zeta chapter for hosting this forum. So as we gear up to raise awareness for domestic violence next month, let's keep in mind, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are victims of physical violence. Therefore, taking action and raising awareness through forums like this one will help lay the foundation so others will not suffer in silence. So thank you once again for joining us today. I offer continued love and support to those who are affected by domestic violence. I am a survivor as well. And for those families and friends who have lost a loved one to this senseless act. So my prayers, our prayers, are always with you. Thank you once again and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deanna Williams. I serve as Alpha Eta Zeta's Get Engaged coordinator. Domestic violence awareness began in October of 1987 as a way to connect and unite individuals and organizations working to prevent domestic violence issues while raising awareness. And so we are happy to continue this initiative in our community and provide tools to members and in the community to report, recognize, and prevent domestic violence. So we hope that you learn and can use these tools to prevent domestic violence. And so first up, we have a Know the Facts. Throughout the presentation and throughout the forum, we'll have different various facts so that you all can understand the statistics that are associated with domestic violence. And the first one is 1 in blank men experience physical violence and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And you can just drop your answer or guesses in the chat. And Sarah Wright, if you could help me out and let me know what some of the guesses are.
All right, I'm seeing 5, 6, 1 in 10, 5, 1. Those are some of the answers.
So actually the answer is 1 in 7. 1 in 7 men experience physical violence and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And next we will have a story from a domestic violence survivor.
Hello, this is my story. I grew up in a home that was middle class, and my father during that time was an alcoholic. And the first man that ever hit me was my father as I attempted to get help for my mother, who, when they were in the middle of an argument. And that started a long line of wrong choices and toxic relationships for me. I ended up marrying someone who was just like my father at that time, meaning he didn't start off being physical abusive, but he did do other things as far as he was a psychological abuser. He was also a financial abuser. And at that time, early 90s, I didn't see a way out. I remember us driving down the street one day and we had an argument and he backhanded me and my nose immediately started bleeding. And a police officer pulled up and basically just told him to clean me up, take her home, and don't do it again. So I felt like I had no way out. And of course, as of now, we are so grateful to have domestic violence, a unit at MPD, and we all work well with law enforcement. But at that time, they just didn't have the training. And one night, after I had gone through some abuse, I ended up with a cracked nose where there is still a little variation in my nose today. And I also, if you actually get close enough to me, if in my right pupil, it is split a little bit because of the damage that was done during one of the violent incidents. And because of no hope, thinking that I would never get out, I planned one night to actually kill him. In the middle of the night, I put 3 bullets in a gun. And when I put the 3 bullets in the gun, I pulled the trigger the first time, nothing happened. I pulled the trigger the second time, nothing happened. And it's like all of a sudden I came back to myself. But I know that I had a praying grandmother who always, she knew what was going on, but would never say. And when I came back to myself, of course, he was very afraid and he had lost a lot of the faculties and he left. And that's how I actually got out of the situation. And even after getting out of the situation, he broke into my house one night. And at this time, one of my parents had given me a gun. And I think that was the only thing that saved me. When I walked in my house, he was sitting on my couch. And when he saw the gun walking in my hand, when he saw the gun, he ran out the house. And I did not have any more problems out of him. But I went through 5 years of hell. Everything that's on the power and control wheel, I actually experienced it from, it began with the isolation and, nobody would believe me and no one would be there for me. And that is my story. And I am Marquita Odom, the executive director for the YWCA. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, because we all know domestic violence, it has many faces, and yet it is also faceless. So I just wanted to briefly give you an abbreviated event of my story. And from that, I had to learn how to love me. I had to learn the difference between toxic relationships, healthy relationships, and I also had to receive counseling, which actually helped me move forward. And now what happened to me did not define who I am. And so now I am walking in my purpose, my passion, and my profession as being the executive director for the YWCA Greater Memphis, where we have the largest shelter in the state of Tennessee with 78 beds, and we are here to assist anyone that is going through a domestic violence situation. We have case managers on site. We also have great community partners, from grassroots partners to some of the largest agencies. We also provide transportation, and we have right now 11 temporary housing vouchers that we can assist someone for 2 years. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story as a survivor who is now thriving from domestic violence, intimate partner violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Odom, for sharing your story. It's a brave thing to not only, eventually leave a domestic violence situation, but to also come forward and share your story. So we really appreciate you coming forward and sharing your story. I'm not sure if you all saw it, but next is another Know the Facts. Every blank seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten by her current or former partner. And you can put your guesses or answers in the chat.
All right, we see 2 seconds. Somebody said 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 15 seconds. Someone saying 30, 20.
So the answer is actually 9. Every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten by her current or former partner. And actually, domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. Next, we will hear from our supporting agencies. First, we will hear from the University of Memphis Athena Project, Dr. Gail Beck. Then we'll hear from the Memphis Area Women's Council with Deborah Clubb. And lastly, we'll hear from Walking into a New Life, Director Joyce Kyles. Dr. Beck.
Thank you so much. May I share some slides?
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your domestic violence awareness meeting. Some of my most favorite people are on this call today, and they're some of the strongest women I know, including Marquita, who we just heard, and Joyce, who we're going to hear from in a minute. These are women who have experienced intimate partner violence and come through to the other side and are living proof that it doesn't have to be this way. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I focus on the aftermath of intimate partner violence and mental health. And at the outset, I want to drill into everybody's head that when we talk about mental health, you have to remember it's not you, it's what happened to you. So having some emotional issues after being exposed to domestic violence is not the result of your weakness or character flaw or any of that. More so, it reflects what happened to you. So when we talk about forms of intimate partner violence or domestic violence, let's kind of just do a quick review. Most people think about physical abuse as what intimate partner violence looks like, so hitting or kicking or stabbing or things like that. But there's also emotional or verbal abuse, being run down, being told you're no good, nobody wants you, you're ugly, you're stupid. Sexual abuse is often co-occurring with emotional and physical abuse. And, people will say, well, I'm married to him, so it's not sexual abuse, it's part of our marital covenant. And I actually think when a partner forces themselves on you sexually, it doesn't really matter if you're married or not. No is no, irrespective of marital vows, or not tonight is the same, right? Marquita mentioned financial abuse. So your partner takes over control of all the finances and gives you a tiny, scrimpy little budget to live on that you can't really live on. That's part of intimate partner violence and abuse. And as well, often we see abuse that's directed at children, pets, or property. Remember, what we're talking about here is basically a form of interpersonal trauma. Somebody that you think you can trust and love and who can cherish you is abusing you physically, emotionally, sexually, financially, and through the people and parts of your life that you care for. The immediate aftermath of intimate partner violence typically include being overwhelmed, being afraid, and being really confused, right? This is my partner. Why is he doing this to me? Or why is she doing this to me? The longer term consequences, the days that follow, many times include blaming yourself. Well, if I hadn't burned dinner, he wouldn't have gotten so angry with me. Sometimes people find their anger in these moments as well. You know, I'm sick and tired of this. He comes home drunk and beats me up, and I'm just not going to do this. Almost to a woman, every single woman that we've worked with in the research clinic that I had is embarrassed. So intimate partner violence carries with it a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment. There's some longer term issues that can happen as well. Compounding problems like post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, excessive levels of anxiety, and substance use and overuse. These are super common problems in the aftermath of interpersonal trauma. That doesn't mean that every time somebody experiences domestic violence, they're going to have one of these issues, but it increases the likelihood of some of these mental health kinds of problems. What predicts if this is going to happen or not? Well, there's a couple of things that have come out of research, and they're really trustworthy findings at this point. The severity of the abuse often can be a good predictor of whether or not a woman has some emotional problems afterwards. So the chronicity of it, how long it went on, whether or not there were weapons involved. Sometimes we see women who have been, for example, locked in their house for weeks on end. That's more severe. So the more severe the abuse, the higher the likelihood of mental health problems. The nature of her environment matters too. So if a woman lives in a really neighborhood where there's high levels of crime, that increases the likelihood of mental health problems. If there's housing or food insecurity, that also increases the likelihood of her having some emotional struggles afterwards. If she has to have ongoing contact with the perpetrator, right? So you've got kids together and you've got shared custody, and your partner uses that shared custody as a way to try to get back at you. So manipulating the children, for example. Do you have a good social support network? Now, remember, Marquita mentioned that intimate partner violence often is characterized by being isolated from friends and family. So thinking about the nature of that isolation in the aftermath of IPV, it's often really, really difficult for women to start to reestablish social networks. And lastly, if you had some mental health struggles before you hooked up with this guy, before you met him and married him, you're likely to have an increase or a return of those mental health problems. That's just sort of how this works many times. A minute ago, I mentioned the mental health research clinic that I run. It's called the Athena Project. We're at the University of Memphis. We work with women who are ages 18 and older, and we focus on the emotional consequences of intimate partner violence. Every single thing that we do is free and confidential. And our goal is to start with a really thorough assessment because women are all different in terms of what's happening with them emotionally. And we provide treatment for women who have post-traumatic stress disorder. If a woman is interested, she gives a call to the Athena Project. It rings on my desk to a confidential phone number. If it's a good fit for her, we start off with an initial assessment that includes diagnostic interviews, including a really thorough assessment of her trauma history. There's a set of self-report instruments that she completes, and we give her feedback about what's going on. If our treatment is appropriate, we will offer her our cognitive behavioral treatment for PTSD. If our treatment isn't a good match, we will help her find treatment that maps onto the problems that she's experiencing. That's also affordable. That is, if she wants to do face-to-face, that's one thing. If she wants to do telehealth, that's another thing. One of the things that is important when we give feedback is we help her to understand what's happening in terms of her mental health. Knowledge is power, right? So if you've been living with somebody who tells you that you're crazy and stupid and you're having some mental health issues, very possible that you're gonna say, see, he was right, I'm crazy and stupid. When in actual fact, you may be experiencing symptoms of PTSD, which isn't being crazy. So understanding what's going on is an incredibly powerful first step in terms of getting the right type of help. Learning more about what is PTSD, how common it is, or depression, or generalized anxiety. Recommendations for services are individually constructed. Mental health, legal, social services, all of those. We have a very easy referral process or way to seek help. The last slide is going to have phone number and email, but all the woman has to do is pick up the phone or email me. Everything we do is free and confidential. And many times women request that our assessment report be sent to their doctor, or if you're going to press charges, your lawyer can have those with your signed release, obviously. So if you'd like a little bit more information about the Athena Project, please reach out to me on phone or email. My phone is 901-678-3973. And my email is jgbeck@memphis.edu. I'm happy to answer questions if we have time for that.
Thank you, Dr. Beck. We're actually going to hold questions until the very end, and so that everyone will have opportunities to ask any of our agencies or any of the survivors questions then. Next, we will have Deborah Clubb with the Memphis Area Women's Council.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for including me in this today. I am Deborah Clubb. I am Executive Director of the Memphis Area Women's Council. I did send a couple of slides or pictures for slides and a link to a video that I was going to share. So if we can find those. The Memphis Area Women's Council is proud to be partner with the other great women and organizations you're hearing from today. They do direct service. They directly interact with women who are surviving or escaping from and recovering from gender violence. Memphis Area Women's Council was created in 2003 to fill a gap that its founders and many women around the city talked about for a couple of years. A gap in having an organization dedicated to advocating for women and girls, to getting our voice back into local discussions among politicians and policymakers. We had lost our representation in the city council and county commission. Women seemed to just be fading away back in 2000, 2001, and 2002 when this was discussed. So Memphis Area Women's Council, to be that voice, to be that on-duty advocate, to show up when issues particularly important to women were being discussed or being shaped. That's the work that we try to do. And in terms of gender violence, we have been working with that since the founding. We have had a domestic violence subcommittee on our board and collaborations underway ever since and ongoing. So when we talk about domestic violence victims, survivors, voice is key. Breaking the silence is essential. Standing up and talking about what is happening to women and girls, how wrong it is that it is not our fault, but in fact, the doing of criminally animated men, that's crucial. So I wanted to talk today about a couple of things in particular. One is the Memphis Says No More campaign, which comes from a collaboration between the Women's Council and our partners on the Memphis Sexual Assault Kit Task Force. Some of you will recall, of course, that Memphis has addressed the presence of over 12,000 stored rape kits, forensic evidence taken from survivors of sexual assault, who called police for help, were seen by the specially trained nurse examiners, were taken into exams and given that exam, which took parts of their bodies, honestly, cells and scrapings and so forth, into these rape kits. And some of them, over half of them, had been stored but never fully tested. So I am a part of that rape kit task force, which continues to this day to get all of that material into laboratories and then into the process of being investigated, used in cases to prosecute our sexual assault perpetrators, our rapists around this community. So the Memphis Says No More campaign, you can see a little sign behind me here, part of that. We are trying to change how people think about rape and sexual assault and domestic violence. Memphis Says No More says that together we will end domestic violence and sexual assault. And along the way, we're trying to do particularly two things. Connect survivors to resources. So our website has all of that material there, as well as videos and posters and how to get cards like this, which are so easy to hide when you're in a bad relationship and need to know where the major phone numbers are. So we're connecting survivors to help and resources and trying to change attitudes and behavior. And evaluations by our friends at the University of Memphis so far show that that is happening. We are moving the needle in terms of how people think about the old excuses, such as, well, she was asking for it, or she shouldn't have been out so late, or if she hadn't been wearing that, or the ones that relate to domestic violence. Well, why didn't she just leave? So we are working with this multi-part campaign to help our community, especially our younger people, know better and do better, and be much more attentive and compassionate to those of us who step forward and report these crimes and need help finding our way, not being told what to do, but finding our way forward. What you're seeing on the screen there is the poster for this year's Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, which is an event that we've had a really great success with, and this will be the 10th one. It's a moment when men and boys can join us, and the ones who feel safe doing it or have the nerve actually wear women's high heels. And we walk a mile around some part of the city, most recently out around the University of Memphis, and carry signs declaring that these men and these boys want us to be safe, want us to have justice, and want us to be free of this brutal treatment that comes to us only because we were born female, for no other reason in the world except that we happen to be female. So if our hosts can play that video. We'll see if that works. Walk a mile in her shoes. It's a stunt, a fun photo. Walk a mile in her shoes. It's a stunt, a fun photo op, but also a powerful demonstration of support for the safety of women and girls. Men and boys, many in women's shoes, walking, stumbling in a march to prevent and end sexual violence and domestic abuse. The Memphis Area Women's Council initiated the walk locally downtown in 2010 with a few dozen men in women's shoes. It blossomed in 2015 down the Main Street Mall as the centerpiece in a day of events that launched the Memphis Says No More campaign aimed at ending violence against women. The walk route has begun and ended at the university's Ramses II statue since 2017. Walkers borrow women's shoes from our supply or bring their own. Nearly 300 walked in 2019. It's men uniting with women, understanding their important role in ending this violence, not just walking in our shoes, but holding each other collectively accountable and teaching the next generation of men the expectations for behavior around domestic violence and sexual assault. The 10th annual Memphis Walk a Mile in Her Shoes is September 21, stepping off at 5:30 p.m. at the Ramses II statue on Central at the University of Memphis. Registration tables will be spread through the walkway behind the Ramses statue and into the adjacent grounds. So come in time to borrow from our supply of women's shoes or bring your own, and choose a sign that expresses your concern for women and girls. Walk a Mile masks will be available to the first 200 to arrive.
University of Memphis students can RSVP to this event on Tiger Zone. The week before the event, you can come by room 226 in the administration building to register and pick up your mask. While you can register on the day of, we highly encourage you to do it in advance.
Thank you. And because of the storms last Tuesday, we were glad we had postponed to this coming Tuesday. I want to invite everyone at Lemoyne and any other campus, and certainly any of you to bring the women and men of your world and your circles to join that walk. The other big program, and we can change the slide. I think I've got maybe just a couple more pictures from the walk, but I wanted to talk a minute about the Violence at Home Victims at Work training that the Women's Council can do. Any of you who may have a workplace or own a company and want to understand better what employers can do in response to the very likely presence in your employee group of someone or several who are being hurt at home, terrorized at home, and still trying to keep their job and do their work. We can offer our training program and materials that help employers know how to respond to that situation with compassion, without judgment, to respond that way, to refer to the local resources that we provide, and just to help keep our women safe. Many working women do deal with this on a daily and nightly basis and still try to take care of their jobs and their families. And it's an astonishing courage and determination that they have. So we want our employers to be supportive when they need to go to court or when they're having health issues that are clearly related to that abuse, and help keep people able to tend to themselves and their families. Not everyone wants to leave that household and that marriage, even with the abusive behavior. And it is, as others have said, not always physical. But I've had focus groups with survivors tell me many times that the emotional, verbal abuse, the words up in your face saying these horrible things, that rattles and stays in their minds and just will not stop way past the pain of a physical injury. So we know that emotional and verbal abuse is a huge problem across this country. I guess then the last thing I would just say is that any of you who want to do more to help change how our community behaves and deal with the attempt to improve attitudes and support for survivors and our voices, I'm happy to hear from you. We have our website, memphiswomen.org. We have the memphissaysnomore.com website. And we're just here to help all of us. It's in every zip code. As one of the opening greeters said, this is everywhere. And it has not gotten any better, of course, with the pandemic and everyone being locked in together, and stress is added to already volatile and dangerous situations. So thank you again for inviting me today. I look forward to hearing the other comments and any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Club, for telling us about the Memphis Area Women's Council and your upcoming event for the Walkabout in Her Shoes. Next, we will hear from Walking into a New Life with Director Joyce Kyles.
Joyce, you're talking, but you're muted.
You know, it would help. You probably could hear me if I would unmute myself, huh? Thank you
Well,
so much.
I actually thought Miss Beverly Anderson was going to introduce you, if that's okay.
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning. And yes, Joyce, are we doing the survivor story or are we introducing?
Yes, so we're going to do the survivor story, Survivor 2 first.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I am a product of a single parent household. My mother worked very hard to send her children to college, and she was very successful. One thing that I did, I wasn't a victim of domestic abuse while I was in my mother's home or while I was growing up, even while I was in college. After being in the workforce for so many years and being social, my beautician introduced me to this guy. And she said that he was a really nice guy. He was an artist, and I should have known then, you know, some of the dots would not connect. But she said he was an artist and he was very talented and he was a real nice guy. So I met him and we started to, you know, exchange numbers. And like our previous speaker said, they come in one way and then they leave another. He was flowers, he was affectionate, he was all of that until one night, which is Christmas Eve, which I call the nightmare before Christmas. I went to my friend's house she had invited us over for soup and pina coladas. And I am Catholic, so on Christmas Eve, we go to church for a midnight mass. So we came over to her house. She had made soup and we were eating soup. And she said, "Oh, you look just like my ex-husband." And he really did. She took out her wedding album and she showed him a picture of her ex-husband, one that she hadn't cut the head off, and he really did. So he felt that he was intimidated. So he said, "Well, let's go." So of course I was driving because he didn't have a car. So I got in the car and immediately he said, "You brought me there to intimidate me." And I said, "No, I didn't." So at this point, we're arguing in the car. So he lived in North Memphis, which means I could have taken 240 home, but something told me to take Interstate 55. So I was taking Interstate 55. At this point, he's just really mad and really, really crazy. So he starts at the Mallory exit. He said, let me out because I have a woman right here at this exit. I don't need you. I kept driving. The next exit, I believe it was Crump. He said, let me out. I have one right here. I still don't need you. Would not stop. So after we left Crump, it was Riverside Drive. I'm thinking in my mind, Riverside Drive, I'm bound to see a police car. So at this point, I had braids. He grabbed my braids by, I'm driving. He's grabbing my braids like this. And he's saying, bitch, I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you tonight. So I'm going like, God, what do I do? You know, I couldn't call anybody because he had control basically of my hair. I couldn't do anything. So I'm driving down Riverside Drive, and at Riverside Drive, and I believe where I think Jefferson, there was a police car that was sitting in the parking lot. All this time, he's still telling me this time he has a handful of my whole right side is pulled to his, and he's getting ready to hit me. So I knew what he was going to do. So I took my car, I ran the light, and I ran into a police car. The policeman was asleep, and it startled him. But I said, okay, well, I can explain it to the insurance company that, you know, I was being going to be hit. So the policeman came to the car and said, well, ma'am, what's going on? And I told him I wanted him out of my car. And he said, well, don't do this. Don't do this. You know, I love you. You know, I love you. Don't do this. The policeman tells him, ma'am, sir, you have to get out the car. So he said, don't do this. Don't do this. And he got out the car. But the policeman, like our previous survivor said, he said, well, don't circle the corner and go pick him up. And I told the policeman, I'm not Nicole Brown Simpson. I'm not taking him back. So in the meanwhile, this was Christmas Eve. I went back over to my friend's house and I was telling her what happened. And she said, well, you don't need him anyway. He's not good for you. So when the courts opened back up, I filed assault charges against him. And in turn, he filed kidnapping charges on me, which in turn had the men in the black suits looking for me because they said when he asked to get out the car and I didn't let him out, it was considered kidnapping. So we had to go to court. We went to domestic violence court. We had to go to court. I told my story with my witnesses. He told his story. And then he told, you know, when I told him how he had me by the hair, and he actually had pulled the braids out and there were hair follicles attached to the braids. He told the judge that wasn't her hair anyway. And the judge told him, it's her hair. If she paid for it, it's her hair. So the judge told him, this is not a case of kidnapping. It is a case where she was in a matter of life and death. And she chose to not let you out because she knew if she would have let you out, you would have killed her. And he dismissed the case against me for kidnapping. But he gave us a restraining order, which is still valid to this day. So my thing is, I know I saw the red flags, but I refuse to believe them. I am a survivor. I was a victim of post-traumatic stress. I did seek therapy. I'm not ashamed to say that I did. And I think every survivor should do that. And my name is Evelyn Malone, and this is my story.
Thank you so much, Ms. Malone, for sharing your story. As I said before, it takes it's a brave step to come forward and get out of a relationship, but also to come forward and share your story. So we really appreciate you. Next is our final Know the Facts poll. And so on average, it takes a person how many attempts to successfully leave an abusive relationship?
All right, I'm seeing 4 and 5. Someone says 3 attempts. 7. and 5.
So the person who said 7 was the correct answer. On average, it takes a person 7 attempts to successfully leave an abusive relationship. Exiting
That
the
was
relationship.
Dr. Beck. That was Dr. Beck.
She knows her facts. Exiting the relationship is the most unsafe time for a victim, as the abuser senses that they're losing power. They will often act in dangerous ways to regain control over the victim. And that just speaks to the emotional and verbal abuse that our agencies have talked about before. And now we will hear from our last survivor of the forum.
Good afternoon yet? Almost. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phyllis Lewis. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my abuse occurred when I was a child. I was about 6 years old. I can remember riding down South Parkway with my mom and her boyfriend at the time, and I was in the middle of them. And as a 6-year-old, you're paying attention to what's kind of going on around you, but not really. So I had like one of those handheld games. I know to kids nowadays they won't be so exciting, but to me it was the best thing since sliced bread. It was one of those games that you put the water in that had the little hoops that you push the button to try to get it to land on the pole inside of the game. So I was doing that. But then as I was playing my game, I started hearing kind of the disruption of the argument that was going on between my mom and her partner. And it continuously like escalated and they were yelling. And then it got to the point where they were like hitting each other over me, like over my head. And then it finally got to a point where my mom, when we were crossing over I-240, and he started slowing down, she opened the door to try to jump out and she tried to grab me, but I was in my seatbelt. And so I didn't know what was going on. All I knew is that all of a sudden, like I heard the door crack open and her jump out. And then she was trying to pull me, but like I said, I was in my seatbelt. And then I kind of caught on to what was going on. And then I was trying to hurry up and get out of my seatbelt. And then when I got out and then I was trying to get out, he grabbed me. I know it had to be like cold. I don't remember the time of the year it was, but I do remember that it had to be cold because I had one of those old throwback starter jackets on. And when I was trying to exit the truck, he grabbed my hood. And so he was pulling my hood. And so it started choking me because I was trying to pull to get out because my mom was trying to get out of the car and he was pulling, trying to keep me in the truck. And then eventually the hood snapped from the coat and it caused me to fall forward, which then my mom was able to get me out of the truck. And then we were running up the side of one of the side streets that was off of Parkway. And then we happened to come upon this like house, and there were these people that were like sitting outside, I guess, like just, doing normal day-to-day stuff. And they saw us running up the street. And so some of the gentlemen from the house came off of the porch and they kind of, waved us to come into the house. And so when they invited us into the house, my mom's partner then kept driving back and forth in front of the house. And, they were talking to us and, there was one of the gentlemen that was kind of like talking to me, trying to make sure that I was okay. And at that point, like my throat was kind of sore. And then they were like, do you think, that we could, take you somewhere safe? And my mom was like, yeah, that would be a good idea. And so then we tried to come out of the house. And then my mom's partner came down the street again, and this time he had a gun. And so I guess they saw the gun before we did. So then they pulled us back into the house, and then they had us to lay down on the floor. And then I remember hearing like the gunshots and like the bullets coming through the window and hitting the house. And so we actually ended up staying the whole entire day and night at these complete strangers' house. And then the next day, we ended up calling the police. The police took us, somewhere safe. But even at 6, like that's something that like I can remember like it was like yesterday. And during that time that my mom was in this relationship with this guy, and she had experienced a lot of abuse that I didn't know about, either because of my age or that it just didn't happen a lot in close proximity to me. There was no VAWA. There was not a lot of resources and things like that for her to be able to help a sister get out of those situations that she was in. And so as an adult, it helped fuel my passion and my purpose for the work that I do today in working with victims and survivors, to let them know that there are options, that there is hope, and that there are people out there that care. So on this call, there are so many amazing people that do such amazing work, and I am so fortunate to work alongside them. So thank you so much for letting me share my journey today.
Thank you so much for sharing and your bravery with sharing. Thank goodness for those neighbors or those complete strangers kind of serving as angels for you all. Next, we will have the introduction of our guest speaker from Sarah Beverly Anderson.
Good afternoon. I was just talking. I am Beverly Anderson, also a member of the Alpha Eta Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta. I am excited really this afternoon to introduce our speaker, Mrs. Joyce Kyles, and I've known Joyce for a few years now. Joyce is an award-winning international facilitator, speaker, 2 times Amazon best-selling author, community advocate, and certified life and thriving skills coach. She's the founder and CEO of Walking into a New Life Incorporated and the CEO of Joyce Kyle Consulting LLC. Joyce has received certifications in the areas of domestic violence, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and mental health. A graduate of Arkansas State University, she most recently received her certification in women's entrepreneurship from Cornell University. Her humbling accolades, and you all get ready, and awards, mentions, and freelance published work include features in the Huffington Post, in Mogul, the Memphis Flyer, the Tri-State Defender, Black Press USA, the New Orleans Tribune, the Welcome Greenbrook from Black Tourists, and being named the Crime Victim Advocate of the Year. A proud wife, mother, and Mimi, Joyce is a member of the Junior League of Memphis and a board member of the Memphis and Shelby County Domestic and Sexual Violence Council. Again, I'm really honored and proud and excited to introduce our speaker. This is Joyce Kyle.
Thank you. All right. Can you all hear me now?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Beverly, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to reconnect in this way and reconnect with Dove Foundation, the work that you all do, and just who you all are as an organization. I mean, your work speaks for itself. So thank you so much for 10 years of putting these types of forums together so that people can come together and learn more about domestic violence and all the intersections, because there are so many, as has been lifted up throughout this entire forum. And we're required to give bios when we get ready to do things. So it's always, I'm proud of every single thing that was shared. Like I genuinely am, because I know the place that I come from. But at the end of the day, I am simply Joyce, who wants to help as many people as I possibly can to not only understand what domestic abuse is, the different intersections that are associated with it, but how to get out of it and stay out. Because it's so important to not just tell people to leave, but we have to give them the tangible tools and the resources to be able to do it and to do it safely. So before I share my additional thoughts, wanted to just circle back to every person who has spoken prior to me. I know just about all of them and the walk and the work that they do. It is an honor and a pleasure to be able to work alongside these women. I know their hearts, their passions, know some of them really intimately, and they know me intimately as well. So much of what has been lifted up by the survivors specifically. I love you all. You are my sisters. Those that I didn't know, and I think Miss Evelyn is probably the one that I don't know as well, but hope to get to know. But Marquita, Phyllis, I love you all. Know your work, proud of you. Thank you all for being proud of me and being willing to work with me. Have known Deborah Club and Dr. Beck, Dr. Gail, probably almost as long as I've been doing this work. They were some of the first people that I talked with when I was in a different space. So just being able to do this work in this space and see myself as myself is indeed an honor. So what I'd like to do is one thing that was also mentioned. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in that space. As I was listening to the flow of the program, I decided that it would be best for me to take a different direction with what I wanted to say and how I wanted to speak. Because a lot of the statistics that were mentioned, I hope that everyone took them down. I purposely did not respond in the chat because, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to phrase it, I knew the answers to every single one of them. So I didn't want to answer, but I'm so glad that they were lifted up. I'm so glad that the different types of abuse has been lifted up, that sexual violence specifically has been lifted up, and that it has its own space as an intersection, that mental health has its own space as an intersection, reproductive health and justice has its own space as it relates to domestic abuse. There are so many types. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time with the statistics because those have already been lifted. I don't want to spend a lot of time even with the different types of abuse as a breakdown because those have been lifted. But I do want to talk about is how I came into this work. And so those that are familiar with me know how I came in specifically. But for those of you that are not familiar with me, I'd like to just take a few moments to share my story, my experience, and how I came into starting walking into a new life in the first place, because people have an assumption of how that began, and it didn't quite go the way that some people may think. So I do have permission to share the story that I'm about to share. So if you can engage with me and if you will walk with me as I talk about my inspiration for walking into a new life and how I came into this work, because it is relevant to this entire forum. Everything that you heard up to my speaking is the experiences of the woman that inspired me to start doing this work. And domestic violence has no face, it has no gender, no orientation, no religious beliefs, as has been lifted at the very beginning. And I really want that to be honed in on, because this woman, you know, had a husband, she had children, she had a job, you know, with the county. So she had the benefits and all the structural things. She was involved with community activities and organizations. So all the things that sounds like a great home environment, the husband, the children, the cars, you know, the opportunities to be in these social settings, stability, all those things are the things that she had. But she was being abused in what was actually her second marriage. The first marriage was physically, emotionally, sexually, financially abusive, and almost resulted in her physical death as a result of that. And so when she got remarried, that marriage was everything but the actual physical abuse. And so as I share this with you, I want you to be clear with understanding that domestic violence is approximately 80% of what you don't see and maybe 20% of what you do. So by the time you see it on the news and you see all the, you know, the broken limbs and the abuse and broken eyes or busted eyes and these types of things, there are so many other things that have happened before then. That person has likely been raped. That person has likely been told that they are fat or ugly or unattractive. That person has likely had their finances removed from them, or it's being controlled in some way. That person, if they're a religious person, that person may have not been able to go to church or worship in the way that's comfortable for them. We don't think about ritual abuse. We don't think about the fact that simple things that we take for granted, like having soap and tissue and deodorant, because I'm gonna be very candid and very plain with this. These are types of things that sometimes are taken away from abuse, from those being abused, as a way of power and control. So when you think about a person who is going through this type of situation, a lot of it may be things that you don't see. And I can recall very vividly this woman sharing how she would go to work every day and never let on to people about her experiences with being abused. And she didn't recognize it as being abused because she wasn't being hit. And so again, I really want to point out to people that abuse is so much deeper and can go so much further than being hit. Then you, of course, have those abusers that do hit, but they know how to hit in such a way that it doesn't leave marks, and make sure that you're wearing the proper clothing so that it's not seen, or encouraging the victim to wear makeup so that the bruises aren't shown. So listening to that woman and watching her go through what she went through was very inspiring and engaging for me, because I watched her transition from being in this space of socialite and working and having a husband and having the children and, you know, the car and being able to get around and do and live and exist, or so I thought. But she was actually masking what was happening and was extremely embarrassed and didn't want to leave because, again, as I already mentioned, she's already been married before. So who wants to go now and say, I'm a two-time loser, because that's how you feel? You know, I've already been there and done that, and it didn't work. Now here we are again. People were talking about me the first time. Now they're going to talk about me even more because I've done this yet again. So just watching the very different facets of this woman's life, and her making the decision in June of 2008, so 2008, she made the decision to go ahead and leave her husband. But within a year's time, she lost the husband, she lost her home, she lost her transportation, and her job decided to downsize. So she lost the job. So everything that she was accustomed to having is systematically being taken away from her. And she's having to deal with not having any family in the city and not wanting to talk with friends. And she's embarrassed, doesn't understand what to do, where to go, how to get started. When she does reach out to people and resources, some of the things that she was told was that you're not trying hard enough, that you're smart, you're educated, or you're attractive, you should be able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. and be able to manage and to make it. And we all know that in 2008, or most of you, in 2008, 2009, what was going on then? The recession. So you have people who are educated, non-educated, everybody is fighting for a job at McDonald's at this point because they're trying to live, take care of their families, and be self-sufficient. And then there's the other piece, the children. Now she's looking at these children are looking back up at her because now they've lost their sense of security. They went for the next 3 years bouncing from house to house, evictions and staying in this place and hiding out and hoping nobody comes to get them, hoping no one comes to get her children, as she's trying to find a place to live and stay and be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. When you can go to DHS and the DHS worker tells you, I'm going to go ahead and give you food stamps, but I really don't feel like you're trying hard enough. So if I don't see any soon results, I'm going to cut you off. These are the types of things that have been told to her by those who work in the system. Situation and what's happening and how can I be supportive in those pieces. What I started to realize is that there are a lot of gaps in the system. There are a lot of gaps and there's not the types of supports that were needed for someone that doesn't particularly look like what you expect a domestic violence survivor to look like. And so Walking Into a New Life's mission was to provide tangible resources for individuals who had been impacted by domestic violence and provide those types of things that were needed, like toiletries, like cell phones, because we don't think about the control that an individual has over that person's phone. They can't call out for help or they're not comfortable. They don't know if they're being tracked. GPS is a real thing on these phones. Location matters, how to turn it off. Teaching individuals about things like that. So I could go on and on and on with that piece, but it's really in an effort to show that this person is not the typical domestic violence individual. It's part of why I focus so hard on the boots on the ground aspect of what I and we do, is because I believe in going out into the places and meeting people where they are. It's not always going to be comfortable for certain people to come in certain neighborhoods because they're not believed and they're not trusted, but they trust me. They see me. They recognize me as a Black woman who has been where they are. And to some of my other allies who are not women of color, but they recognize that I can come from a place that can speak and teach and talk and reach other platforms. So I'm thankful and blessed to be in that space, to be able to do that. But as I was transitioning out of my own situation and looking back on how Walking Into a New Life got started, I also want to lift up the fact that men and men's advocacy was extremely important to me, and that this woman spoke very highly on a man who came into her life at a time when she was at her lowest point. Not as a boyfriend, not as someone who was trying to court her in any shape or form, but someone who encouraged her that she could take the experiences that she had gone through and create opportunities for herself that would not only feed herself and her children, but to be able to also grow and help others to heal. She never believed that that was possible to do, but she did. So I'm gonna fast forward to where all of that led for her. Because people always ask me, well, whatever happened to that woman? So that woman became an international facilitator, a 2-time best-selling author, a community advocate, a certified life and thriving skills coach. She became the founder and CEO of Walking Into a New Life Incorporated. She's the CEO of Joyce Kyles Consulting LLC, and she has been married for 7 years now. And that person is me. So I am a living, breathing, walking testimony of what domestic violence looks like. And I'm also a living, breathing testimony of what the other side of abuse can look like, what it should look like, what we should encourage other people to aspire to. Because when I started doing this work, I had individuals who tried to keep me from doing it because I wasn't as well known, or because my platform wasn't as big as someone else's. Not the fact that my story mattered, not the fact that help. It was all about the fluff. It was all about the numbers. It was all about the publicity. And for me, it's all about the work. It's all about the people who need to be helped. I don't care what color. There's always an opportunity for you to help, and we need to use it. We need to exercise it. We need to have forums like these and continue these types of forums. But not only just continue them, but when they're over, go back and reach back out to the people that signed on. Go back and reach back out to your sisters and your brothers, because this work has to continue, because abuse continues. As long as there's abuse, there will always be a me or a Phyllis or a Marquita or an Evelyn. There will always be the foundation. There will always be individuals who will come together. There will always be Deborah Clubs. There will always be Dr. Becks. Either it will be us individually, but it will be someone out there who needs to know that when we stop doing work, that someone can pick up the mantle. Because see, I just celebrated my 50th birthday a couple of months ago. So I don't know how many more years I have in this space, but as many years as I have to give, this is the work that I have been called and commissioned to do. And I will do it, and I will do it with excellence. I will do it unafraid. I will do it unapologetically, and I will do it my way. I will do it in the way that I know that victims and survivors and advocates need me to show up. And I want to show up for them in that same way. This work has to continue. The voices have to be heard. And then when they're heard, if they come to you with that voice, then take their concerns seriously, take them honestly. If you can't give them an answer, direct them to someone who can, because we don't all know the answers. That's why this is a continuous thing. And that's why we have to continue having these types of forums, because there's always something new to be learned. There's always an organization that you may not be aware of. There's always resources that may not be available. So one of the things, as I wrap up my piece to share about Walking Into a New Life, is that in addition to wanting to provide those tangible resources that I mentioned, like the cell phones, like gas cards, because we need to stop assuming that everybody that's going through abuse rides the bus. Some of them have vehicles and they need gas cards. So that's a thing. Toiletries and hygiene products, things that we take for granted. Those are things we do our best to provide. Peer support, and the peer support group that we are starting next month. That's important, because sometimes we just have to be able to just unwind and share with other people. And then also, in one of the biggest things that I started doing, as long as there's funding available, is relocation. I'm grateful for the organizations that we have in the city, and there are not many, that are actually able to house. And as Marquita lifted up, the YWCA is the largest and biggest, one of the few in the whole state, and definitely one of the best. But sometimes people need to get all the way out of the city. And I've been so blessed and fortunate to be able to work with agencies like hers and some others, where sometimes they just need a bus ticket to get out of town, need a plane ticket to leave. They need somebody to drive them out of the city, because there are resources that may be available to them if they could just get to them in another place. So emergency housing is important for those who are able to stay, but for those who may need to actually leave the city in order to be safe, then I want to always be able to do my best to provide that as an option as well. Because as I lifted up when I was speaking earlier, I didn't have any family here. Like, I don't have family in Memphis. I'm not originally from here. And so for me to get any help or support, first of all, took me trusting someone to share my story with. And then two, having the opportunity to travel somewhere to get help. I could have gotten help from some family members if I had just trusted myself and others enough to say I need help. I didn't do that. So anyone that comes and approaches me now, that is one of the first things that I try to encourage them to do. And then that way we can go from there to see if staying here is the best thing to do, or if there's an opportunity for you to go somewhere else where you can be safe, then let us explore that and see how we can help. So that's my story, my testimony, a bit about me and what I do. I love what I do. I'm thankful again to everyone who has engaged me in this space today, and for those who continue to work with me and allowing me to work with them so that we collectively can change the way that advocacy looks and change the way that individuals are helped, served, and supported one person at a time. So thank you again for your time, and I'm gonna turn it back over to our moderator. God bless.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joyce, for serving as our guest speaker, sharing your story, and just highlighting how victims can survive and walk into a new life. We really appreciate you. And next we will have a question and answer. So they'll be facilitated by LaMonica Wright. And so if anyone has any questions for any of our agencies, any of our speakers, one of the survivors, or our guest speaker.
All right, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those in the chat. Anyone have any questions?
I have a question for Dr. Beck. Dr. Beck, you mentioned various types of treatment for victims of domestic violence. It's a two-part question, actually. Because you're on the campus at University of Memphis, is this program, your Athena project, just for the community of University of Memphis, just for students of University of Memphis? And then can you elaborate on some of the treatments available?
Thank you for asking that. That's a really important point that I overlooked. The Athena project is for anybody in the entire state of Tennessee. Thanks to the pandemic, we now are able to use telehealth, and we are continuing with face-to-face, and we have sort of a little hybrid way of doing assessments if somebody's concerned about COVID transmission. We provide parking, which anybody who's ever gone on campus at U of M knows can be a little bit of a challenge. So we provide parking vouchers for people. And my license applies, my psychologist license applies to anyone who is physically located in the state of Tennessee. Our treatment is appropriate for women who have post-traumatic stress disorder that is stemming from intimate partner violence. Many times women have had other types of exposure to domestic violence. And so our job is to figure out, like what Phyllis was talking about in terms of childhood exposure. Our job is to figure out if where to position treatment, what's going to be sort of the most helpful, because we know that treatment often you can see what we call generalization. So you work on one issue and the gains apply to other kinds of issues. So our treatment is cognitive behavioral in nature. A cognitive behavioral treatment is a skills acquisition approach to psychotherapy. So it's not like you lay on the couch and somebody sits behind you and takes notes. That's an old form of treatment that may not be real appropriate for domestic violence survivors. So our treatment is 11 or 12 weeks long. It really depends upon what works best for you, how many sessions you need. So we have some flex with that. And we work on specific kinds of skills to manage some of those symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. There's some modules about being aware of red flags. I think that Marquita may have used that word, that red flags, that a beginning relationship may actually evolve to include some abuse. There's some training around speaking up and rebuilding support systems and that kind of thing. So It's not a forever kind of treatment. Some treatments go on for years and years. We know that when we use a skills-based approach to treatment, we can see rapid gains, and we're basically empowering a woman to learn some new skills to manage what's happening in order to not need to be in therapy for a long time.
Thank you, Dr. Beck. We also had a comment from Ms. Clubb. She says, I want to take a second to emphasize the importance of engaging men in the work to end this violence. Everything we can do to awaken them to the harm this does is important, so that the good men, the majority, will join in stopping the behavior of those who terrorize women and girls. I welcome anyone who wants to join that work. And Ms. Clubb, did you want to elaborate any more on that?
Thank you. I would kind of like to do that. I've been doing some research recently for a chapter for a book that's being put together about what the work around the country on the rape kit backlogs, what kinds of things that's led communities to understand. My chapter is about prevention of sexual assault, which I think one immediate reaction to that can be it can't be prevented. Because if there's a rapist who wants to rape, it's going to happen. But we have to take a longer other view. And a big part of what I'm reading as I read into the research that's available is that working with men and boys, and of course, especially starting with boys pretty young, to know girls and women, to have conversations, to understand how we all get along and the value that we all have, that's actually real important. And it's a proven fact from some of this research that, for example, many men in prison for sexual crimes have never had what they'd consider a conversation with a woman in their families, in their neighborhoods, in their life experience. So the brutality and the meaninglessness of us to them that feeds their willingness or readiness to treat us like we don't matter. It's based on life experience in some cases where they literally didn't even have a relationship where a woman or a girl was someone they knew and understood and therefore cared for. But that kind of experience aside, it's just real important that we know that women and girls, Joyce, Phyllis, Gail, all of us working through our various agencies and so forth, have been trying for a good 40, 50 years nonstop in this country with the Violence Against Women Act support eventually and all of that to change the amount of these crimes that happen to women and girls. And we're not getting a huge change until we get the men and boys to change. I think I can hear some of you thinking that's got to be right, because the people carrying out the violence are those men and boys. We cannot change enough to stop it. We have to work with them, raise them, train them, educate them, and help them, the good ones, as I say, who are the majority, join us in stopping the rape jokes, stopping the crazy fraternity parties where somehow sexual abuse is a part of the game, change the behavior around high school sports teams that demean girls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for giving me that moment. It's still new to me to talk about and to try to get people engaged on, because it's something that we don't see a lot of yet in our community. And I just really think that's got to be an important next focus of the work. Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Thank you. We had a question in the chat, and I think we have some people already answering those questions. Ms. Joyce has answered and Dr. Beck has answered. The question was, does anyone know the statistics of domestic violence on college campuses and what help is available to students? And so, Ms. Joyce, you talked a little bit about focus on the college campus in a Title IX department. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so I recently did an event with University of Florida, and that was one of the things that they lifted up. And I know that U of M here has a Title IX department, which most campuses do. And that is a specific focus for Title IX, is to address domestic sexual violence of that nature with college students. And they are, those who work on the campuses are mandated reporters. So there's a whole topic that could be discussed centered around that, but I want to at least provide like a general answer just so people are aware that there is a lot of discussion that is going on around the country on college campuses, specifically about domestic and sexual violence, and that most campuses do have some sort of Title IX implementation in place. And I know that Dr. Beck can definitely speak to that. And I wanted to really quickly also lift up Deborah's point about the men and engaging men. One of the things that when I first started doing this work that I really wanted to make sure that I did mention was that it was a man who encouraged me to start doing this work in the first place. It didn't come from a woman, it came from a man. And it came from a man who saw me as a friend and being supportive of me, and very early into this space. So there are some great men, and I ended up marrying him. That was not our intent. Our intent was, let me help you through this. And he was very honest with me in saying that I don't really know and I don't have all the answers, but I know that you need help and you need support in ways, and therapy and counseling, which I did get. It was Dr. Beck who actually, in sitting in one of her workshops, that I learned early on that I suffered from PTSD. Wasn't there for that. I was there just to hear her speak, not knowing, I'm going to be diagnosed in this way. So very early on, I started working with an organization called A Call to Men, who does a lot of national and international work centered around men and boys. And I've had them here a few times, and we've done some work, and we have an extension of our organization called Men Against Domestic Violence. So to Deborah's point, and have been working diligently, because getting men and boys engaged it's a daunting task. And unfortunately, society in some regard has made it that way. But we continue to fight on individually and collectively to see that come into fruition. So we do have an arm of that work with what we do as well. So yeah, as I said, I know Dr. Beck can definitely speak more to the Title IX piece. I saw her just put something in chat. So Walk a Mile in Her Shoes is definitely a way. The Men Against DV, some of the work that we've done in that space is another way, but definitely encouraging folks on college campuses. And I've been really blessed to be able to speak around the country at several college campuses, including U of M. As a matter of fact, that was the Title IX prevention is one that I spoke at, now that I think about it. So just wanted to lift those points up as well.
Thank you.
Can I add a little bit to
Yes.
what Joyce just offered? One of the things that we're seeing on college campuses around the country is what's called bystander intervention training. So bystander intervention basically takes students at whatever level that they are, freshman, sophomore, etc., and helps you to understand that if you see someone who is making a rape joke, you need to say, hey, that's not funny, right? If you see someone at a party who is trying to take advantage of somebody else who is incapacitated because of the amount of alcohol they've had, you need to intervene. And it's not just sort of the message you need to intervene, but there's some really specific training about how to do that in a way that's cool, right? Because you're a college student, being cool is like number one, right? Classes and all that are kind of down the list a bit, but how to do that in a way that is credible, that doesn't make you look like you're part of the campus police, right? How to, get your friend out of a difficult situation, how to how to step up and say to a peer, you know, not cool to do that, right? And it's interesting because bystander intervention programs are what we've been talking about in terms of changing the culture. It's a preventative form of intervention. And I'm encouraged that we're seeing more and more colleges and universities adapting and implementing bystander intervention programs, because it's one of the easier ways that we can start to change the culture around gender-based violence.
Right. Thank you. All right, do we have any more questions? I actually had a question regarding the pandemic and how it has affected people who report domestic violence. Has the pandemic changed that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I'll try with that to start off. We know from the reporting, the calls to police and other agencies, that during the lockdown, of course, when people were ordered to be home, reporting dropped off. And as soon as they could come out again, the numbers went way up. So, you know, above what they would have been a year ago. So there's no question that in homes where there was already violent behavior, and in those as well where maybe people were managing to get through a relationship, you know, day to day, coping with really not being that happy with each other anymore, or having some various issues, but maybe because one or both would go away, you know, go away somewhere during the day to work, and they didn't have to really cohabit literally, except, you know, in the evening a bit or whatever. They could keep that tension from building up. But once everybody was locked in, and you had, in many cases as well, children at home with their problems with school or not getting to see friends, and anyway, things have been very, very explosive and very deadly. And I don't have right here, and I do not say numbers unless I've got them in front of me, but the numbers boomed something like 40% in terms of the aggravated assault reports to the police. Not every one of those was intimate partner violence, but that still measures what our community as a whole has been suffering in terms of reacting to the stress and tensions of the disease, of losing jobs, of not having enough money or food, potentially losing housing, children without their anchors of school and friends and teachers looking after them, etc. We saw that coming. I'm going to brag for just a second. We saw that coming. I did a piece for the Commercial Appeal. We quickly put out some materials to try to let the community know that even when the agencies had to keep their staffs from coming to work, the staffs were at work through telephones, through making appointments, doing telehealth and all of that. So we wanted people to know that there was still help. But hey, if you're locked in the house with the person who beats on you or calls you those nasty 4-letter words all the time or kicks you around, you can't get to your phone or to your laptop to make that call until finally maybe things opened up. We even had a PSA that could run on television that suggested that the rest of us needed to be paying much more attention to what we could overhear in the next apartment, or what we could observe through the, you know, in the next yard, or you know, down in the courtyard or whatever, so that we could do better about calling for help for those who could not call for it themselves.
Right.
So, Ms. Wright, it has been an ongoing nightmare for people who have those violent households to contend with. And we all, as serving agencies, have tried to pivot, as they say, and be able to reach them in whatever way is reachable through screens and telephones.
Yes. Well, we thank you all for all of your hard work. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator if we don't have any more questions.
And so lastly, we just want to provide you all with some additional resources as along to the resources from the agencies. If you scan this QR code or visit the link at the bottom, you can access the contact information for local agencies here in Shelby County, as well as all over Tennessee. So just going to give you all a second to scan it or write down the URL if you all need to. And then after that, we'll have our closing by our Domestic Violence Awareness Coordinator.
Just want to shout out 211 for giving me those sources. Keep in mind, calling 211, Memphis Public Library and Information Center, is where you can get assistance for almost anything. They can answer almost every question that you have. All right, so October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The Alpha Eta Zeta Dove Foundation chose to use the last Saturday of September to kick off Domestic Violence Month because many times it gets lost in the sea of pink. You've heard from agencies, survivors, and our riveting speaker. Domestic violence happens every day, every 9 seconds, regardless of gender, age, race, zip code, religious status, or financial status. Let's be our sisters and our brothers' keeper.
Then they must be in the house.
By showing that there's hope and that survivors can thrive. I want to thank our survivors, Marquita, Evelyn, and Phyllis, for their riveting stories, and Miss Joyce as well for her story. We really appreciate you being candid and open with us relative to sharing your story, and I hope that it touched others' hearts as it did mine. And I'm just so proud to know that you ladies are thriving as survivors, because we know a lot of them are not thriving, and some of them unfortunately have passed. So we want to remember those who succumbed to domestic violence as well. This has been an awe-inspiring program, and I thank you all very much for taking time to speak with us about what has been happening for decades. But it seems like it's just finally coming into light, I guess, in the last 10 or 15 years, where we're really showing it as a pressing issue, a really bothersome societal problem. So let's continue the conversation. And as I said, remember the ones who survived and the ones who did not survive. This event is being live streamed via YouTube. So for those folks who missed it, I hope that they will share it and view it later. Just be alert. Check on your sisters, check on your brothers, watch the signs, if they change in their habits or their appearance or their eating habits or just their attitude or their behavior. Watch them and ask them what's going on with them, and let them know you genuinely care about what's going on with them. Because at the end of the day, we want to show that we care. And so this program, for so many reasons, we're going to continue to have to educate the public and just to, again, bring awareness to this pressing problem. So we showed the resources, we've shown you the victims, we've had a speaker. We don't want you to suffer in silence. We want you to get the help that you need. They say hypertension is a silent killer. Well, domestic violence is a silent killer also. So thank you so much to my committee. I appreciate everything that you ladies have done to pull off a really impactful program. As I said, we're going to continue to do this program every year, the last Saturday in September. And I hope during the month of October, you will continue to share domestic violence forums or events or attend and participate, just so folks will know that it is an important issue. It doesn't mean if you go to an event that you possibly are a victim and people are going to look at you some kind of way. And it's okay to go to therapy or go to a psychologist. It's okay. There's no stigma, there's no stereotype to that. That just means you're seeking the help that you need. So I hope that this program has been as impactful for you as it has been for me. I thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your attention. And again, let's look out for each other. Let's take care of each other, and let's not suffer in silence. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Joe.
Committee members, if you could just stay on for like 2 minutes, I'd appreciate it.